What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel. Today we're going to discuss Green Bay Packers defense, specifically what went wrong against the Minnesota Vikings, because it's been something that's been an issue for them that they've been navigating for much of this season, and it's something that they're going to have to get buttoned up before the playoffs arrive. But first, you know what to do. Hit like on the video. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com, including the article version of what we're discussing here today. And my Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for your Wisconsin sports radio needs every day of the week. Find me on Sports Lead Monday through Friday, 3 to 6. Multiple days per week. So like I said, we're going to talk about the Packers defense, what went wrong against the Vikings, and reason we're a couple days past that game, obviously, but we're going to dive into it because, like I said, it's been a reoccurring issue here and there throughout the course of the season. And specifically what I'm referring to is Green Bay's middle of the field defense, which Sam Darnold, the Vikings passing game, They attacked it relentlessly. They were really effective, really efficient between the numbers against Green Bay. And we're going to talk about a few of those contributing factors from the Packers' perspective. And like I said, there's a few contributing factors. It's a beautiful thing about the game of football, right? We always want to pick out what's the one thing that went wrong, what's the one thing that went right. But there's always so many different elements in play that impact the outcome of a single play and obviously impact the outcome of a game. So let's dive into what a couple of those factors are. One, let's start with a positive, the run defense. The run defense has continued to be very, very good for the Green Bay Packers this season. They held Minnesota as a team, I believe, to under 3 yards per rush in this game. And typically, and we've talked about it on here before, but typically when you're a defense and you can find success against a run game, you're going to find success as a whole against the opposing offense. But that wasn't the case for Green Bay. And a big part of that was because even though Green Bay was able to put Darnold, the Vikings, behind the sticks in those obvious passing situations, they weren't able to capitalize on it because they weren't able to generate pressure. Overall on the day, Sam Darnold was 33 of 43 passing for 377 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Like I said, over the middle of the field was a big issue for Green Bay. In that part of the field specifically, of Darnold's 33 completions, 23 of them came between the numbers. He completed 85% of those throws for 289 of his 377 yards with 2 touchdowns. Like I said, big issue for Green Bay in that game. And the pass rush, the ability to not generate pressure, was a huge factor. I believe in a recent video or two leading up to this game, I had discussed how the pass rush had been trending in the right direction, and not just for a game or two, but for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. But against a top-tier opponent, we saw the Packers' 4-man rush, even their inability to generate pressure blitzing, we saw them regress to the mean, what they've been for much of the season. And like I said, that rendered the run game, or the run defense, I should say, ineffective, because the benefit of containing the run, right? You put the offense in a 2nd and 8. You put them in a 3rd and 9 situation because you're able to stop them on early downs, is that your pass rush can pin their ears back. They can go get after the quarterback. But if you're not getting after the quarterback and you're the Minnesota Vikings, who has Sam Darnold playing at a high level, so many pass-catching options, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor was an issue for this Packers defense. I mean, that's a tall task, and when you're not getting pressure on the quarterback, whether it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 9, that offense, those options in the passing game, that's going to be a really, really difficult group to have to defend. So, like I said, and we all know, we've seen it, the Packers' pass rush has been up and down, we'll say. For the course of the season, they came into this game ranked 26 in ESPN's pass rush win rate metric. And according to PFF's metrics, Darnold was under duress just 31% of his dropbacks. For some context around that number, over the course of the entire season, if Darnold was pressured at a rate of 31% for the entire season, that would rank 32nd out of 42 eligible quarterbacks. Or in short, he's got a lot of time. Relative to the rest of the NFL, that is not a high pressure rate. From a clean pocket in this game, Darnold was 26 of 30, 315 yards, 3 touchdowns. Absolutely lights out. When the Packers did blitz, and Jeff Hafley tried, as we've seen throughout the course of the year, he's tried to drum up some pressures for this defense. Darnold, again, lights out. 12 of 14, 131 yards and a touchdown. Averaged over 3 seconds per pass attempt when he was blitzed. That's a long time in football. So combination of the pass rush not getting home or the blitz not getting home in those situations. And of course, the obvious impact of that is now you're exposed on the back end, right? You just sent a blitzer, maybe two blitzers, and you're not getting home. So now you're shorthanded in the secondary. And also a credit to Sam Darnold, just his ability to move around the pocket to avoid pressure, to buy that extra half second of time to find the open receiver as well. So everything we just mentioned there, huge issue. Obviously, our eyes saw it, and it's something that's been lingering for this season. And when you're not able to, we all know, get after the quarterback, when you're not able to generate steady pressure, that's an added burden on your secondary. Your secondary, which again, for the Packers, shorthanded, no Jair Alexander, no Evan Williams, Zane Anderson left the game. You're now putting those players in a position where they have to defend longer, where they have to be in coverage longer, again, against Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison. That is a tough ask for really any defense. And I think another part of this equation, because I had said the pass rush had been trending in the right direction in recent weeks, I think a key component to the upward trajectory that they were on was the complementary football component. The fact that the Packers offense the last few weeks had been giving them a lead to play with. Not just a lead, but a multi-score lead, 10, 14-point lead early on in the game. So what does that do? Gets the offense out of its game plan. They become pass heavy. They become more one-dimensional. You're a pass rusher. You're not as worried about defending the run in that situation. So what are you doing? You're getting off the ball. You're bending your ears back. You're going and getting the quarterback. I think that was a crucial factor that obviously wasn't a part of this game because the Packers were the one who were trailing by multiple scores. Last thing I'll say on this, and I think, I can't remember if I've discussed this here before or not, but we're going to dive into it briefly. I think this is a key, this context is important to the play of the pass rush, the numbers game. In a 4-3 defense, 4 defensive linemen, you're outnumbered. There's 4 defensive linemen, there's 5 offensive linemen. When the offense keeps a tight end in, which is a trend we're seeing around the NFL because of the athleticism at the position, you can ask a tight end to stay in and chip and still get out in the passing game. Now all of a sudden it's 6 versus 4. If there's a running back that's in the game to block, that's another blocker. 6 versus 4, maybe even 7 versus 4 if the tight end chips. The way offensive linemen pass defensive line from one to each other, or just the little jabs that they give, on most plays, each of those defensive linemen who are already outnumbered are now getting touched by multiple offensive linemen on that play. That's a factor in this. That's a numbers disadvantage that the Packers' defensive front is at, and it makes it even more important when Hafley does generate or does dial up blitzes that Green Bay is able to generate those pressures, because now in that instance you're leaving yourself, as we talked about, shorthanded in the secondary. You're at a numbers disadvantage, and if you don't get home, you're going to get picked apart like the Packers did against the Vikings. Whereas in a 3-4 defense, your 3 down linemen, you have your 2 edge rushers, you have 5 defensive linemen. You are one-on-one. Now, all that said, Packers have to do a more consistent job of getting after the quarterback, of winning their one-on-one matchups. You're not going to win them all, obviously, but when you get that opportunity, you have to capitalize on it. Not saying that what we've seen over the course of the season is good enough, right? They need more consistency from that group, but I think we'd be naive as well to not be mindful of, again, the numbers part of the equation and how that factors into the production that we're seeing from this group. And Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, by PFF's metric, are among the most double-teamed, chipped defensive tackle and defensive ends in football this season. So again, they need more from that group. Not saying otherwise, but I think being mindful of that is an important part of, as we watch how this group has progressed and where they go from here. And again, this group has to get better. I've said it a million times here. The play of the pass rush, the consistency of the pass rush is going to be what determines the ceiling for this Packers defense this season, because when that group is rolling, everybody on the defense benefits, and when they're not, they get picked apart like they did against the Vikings. All right, now let's jump to part 2 of what went wrong for this Packers defense over the middle of the field. Something Matt LaFleur talked about on Monday, the spacing between the second level and the third level, the spacing between the linebackers and the safeties on the back end. He said the linebackers in a number of instances weren't getting enough depth. They weren't getting deep enough. So there was a big space discrepancy between where they were located on the field and where the Packers safeties were located on the field. And that created some huge passing lanes, some huge spaces that the Vikings were able to attack over the middle of the field. Now let's rewind a couple of weeks. Weeks 13 and 14. I know I wrote about it over at ESPNlacrosse.com. Can't remember if we talked about it here or not, but the Packers' middle of the field defense in those two games against Miami, against Detroit, had really struggled as well. And in part, Tua with the Dolphins, Jared Goff with the Lions, they pick apart everyone over the middle of the field. I mean, that's what those two quarterbacks, that's what those two offenses do really well. Against those opponents, you're going to give up a decent amount of yards over the middle of the field. But the numbers that they were putting up against Green Bay, again, between the numbers, were pretty staggering. And one of the aspects that I talked about coming off of those two games was there was a key element, a key player who was missing, Edgerrin Cooper. Edgerrin Cooper was sidelined for those two games with the hamstring injury. And it really felt like the Lions, the Dolphins were really trying to exploit that part of the Packers defense. Now, the last 2 weeks leading up to the Vikings game against New Orleans, against Seattle, Edgerrin Cooper's back, we see a lot more buttoned up play over the middle of the field. And a lot of that is because of what Edgerrin Cooper brings to the equation. We see it on a weekly basis when he's out there. That speed, that athleticism, that playmaking, that 4.51 speed that he possesses, that's terrific coverage ability in the middle of the field from the linebacker position, just because of the ground he can cover, the space he can make up, the passing lanes he can close because of his speed. And with that speed comes versatility, right? When he has the ability to fly around the field to, again, close that space. If you're Jeff Hafley and you're putting together the game plan, that impacts, gives you more options in how you utilize him, because again, you can ask him to do more. You can put him in different positions knowing that he can get back to or get to certain spots in a specific time because of the speed that he has. And something that Xavier McKinney talked about, I think this was after the Jacksonville game, was with that speed, it's not only what you ask of Edgerrin Cooper, but it's, if you're Jeff Hafley, but it's what you ask of your defensive back, specifically your safeties. I mean, if you you have Cooper who can cover this amount of ground, who can get to certain spots, that gives you a little more flexibility in what you ask Xavier McKinney to do, because again, you have Edgerrin Cooper in the middle and that ground that he can cover. So again, there's a trickle down to having him on the field. Tremendous, tremendous talent, tremendous upside. We are seeing it unfold each week here over the last few weeks. However, against the Vikings, we saw some of the growing pains as well. Still a first-year player. He's still a rookie navigating the jump from college to the NFL, that learning curve. He's also a rookie who's missed a fair amount of time in training camp, in the preseason, a couple occasions here during the regular season. It's a lot of valuable snaps that, like every rookie needs, but Cooper has missed out on. And against again, top-tier opponent, top-tier offense in the Minnesota Vikings, we saw those growing pains magnified again against an opponent of the Vikings caliber. And when Matt LaFleur on Monday was asked about Cooper's play, again, talked about how the playmaking ability, the tremendous talent that he is, how excited he is for where Cooper can go. But he also said it was a mixed bag. Also talked about that there's areas that showed up on the tape that he has to improve upon. And again, when we put that element together with LaFleur also mentioning that the depth from the second level, that the linebackers weren't getting deep enough, there was a coverage component there as well where things were missed, right? We saw the tackles for loss in the run game from Cooper. Excellent. But there's still, again, and this is 100% expected, 100% normal for a rookie, again, making the jump from college to NFL, there's a learning curve that Cooper's navigating as well. And so I think that some of those coverage responsibilities were exploited by the Minnesota Vikings. And again, I'm focusing on Cooper here. This certainly isn't all on Cooper. It's not having Quay Walker, right? That's a lot of athleticism that's lost that you're now asking Isaiah McDuffie or Eric Wilson make up for. So that's a part of this equation too. Some of those windows, that space that we were talking about that Cooper can close, maybe not to the same extent, but Walker has the ability as well with his speed, with his athleticism, and they didn't have that on the field either. So in no way is this all on Cooper. But again, when LaFleur is discussing what went wrong over the middle of the field, again, the focus at times was on the linebacker position, which obviously Cooper's a big part of. So I think that's another area, and I think we'll see that aspect of it continue to improve just as you get Quay Walker back in the mix, hopefully soon, as Edgerrin Cooper continues to get more reps, gets more comfortable, just gains more experience. But when we look at this game specifically, this Vikings game, the success that they had, the linebacker play in coverage where they're located was a part of that equation. LaFleur also said he felt defensively, play call wise, what Hafley dialed up. There's some things that they could have done different as well, but this was part 2 of, all right, what went wrong over the middle of the field against the Vikings? All right, the last part. What went wrong over the middle of the field for the Packers? They had a big blow early on when Zane Anderson exited the game with a concussion, and Matt LaFleur was very, very clear about this on Monday. Fortunately, injuries are a part of the game, and them having to move Javon Bullard from the nickel to safety, obviously having to rely on Eric Stokes more, move Keyshawn Nixon from the boundary to the slot. There's a lot of movement that had to take place. LaFleur said, not an excuse. Every team has to deal with injuries each week. There's things like that happen throughout the course of the season to every team. It's not an excuse. Now, with that said, from my perspective, I don't think that we can ignore that component either. Because something that Jeff Hafley has talked about after the Jacksonville game, if you recall, Evan Williams exited that game early. They moved Javon Bullard from the nickel to the safety in that game, just like they did this week. That is a big jump for a rookie to make. Those are two completely different positions. And throughout the week of practice, there's only so much time on the practice field. There's only so many reps to go around that Javon Bullard, when he's out there, and again, this was his first game back after missing a few weeks from injury as well. But as he's going through practice throughout the week, he is only taking these starting nickel reps. He's listed as a safety. The Packers will rely on him at safety if they have to. But in practice, he is only taking the starting nickel reps. So now, in a live game, when you're asking him to go play safety, again, completely different position, completely different responsibilities, and it's not something that he repped with the starting defense throughout the course of the week. Just not enough time for it. This, just the how it goes in the NFL, right? So that's a big jump for him to have to make in that game. And then, like as I mentioned, there's the trickle-down effect. All right, now Nixon goes from playing in the boundary to playing in the slot. Now Eric Stokes goes from being a depth option at cornerback to now he's starting opposite of Carrington Valentine. That continuity on the back end is pretty much zapped, right? Because you are, and I know those are positions that each of those guys have played at various points each season, but in terms of the practice reps, and the same thing goes for Keyshawn Nixon, during the week, he's practicing to be the boundary cornerback, and now all of a sudden, he's playing the nickel position as well. So I think that also was a part of the equation in terms of the struggles that we saw from the middle of the field defense from Green Bay. And again, not an excuse. Injuries happen. You have to adapt. You have to overcome it, or you lose football games. But we also, I think, would be naive to say that didn't play some sort of factor in the outcome in the Vikings' success that they had over the middle of the field. And Zane Anderson, his play has really come seemingly out of nowhere in recent weeks. But as you hear the coaching staff talk about him, I mean, Rich Bisaccia, he said, whether it's special teams, whether it's defense, every single day, Zane Anderson is preparing like he's a starter. Xavier McKinney has talked about how he's in the meeting rooms. They sit next to each other every day, asking questions, picking McKinney's brain. I mean, it's cliche to say next man up, but that's seemingly how Zane Anderson prepares each and every single day to be able to go out there and capitalize on the opportunity to start like he's been able to. So I do think that was a part of the equation. Not saying it's everything, but it's something as well. Lastly, there's been a lot of good from this Jeff Hafley defense in year one. A lot of good. But as I mentioned, this past game, a couple of weeks ago, over the middle of the field is where teams have taken advantage of them. As we look ahead to the postseason, and they might have to see the Vikings, the Lions, two of these teams who have had success there, Philadelphia. That's a part of the defense where they're going to have to get things buttoned up. More sound play, responsibility-wise from the linebackers, getting after the quarterback from the pass rusher is going to be big components, and finding that success there. So if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. might as well hit like. You might as well hit subscribe. Well, as long as you're still here, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com. Download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for your Wisconsin sports radio needs. Until next time, friends, take care.